today I'm going to discuss a little bit about the history of permanent makeup. You do have that in your book. These are yours to keep, so please feel free to write, highlight, check, do whatever you'd like with it. And we'll be going through in sections, not necessarily step by step. We're going to, move things around a little bit as it fits the day. But we will discuss today the different face shapes and structures, as well as the face mapping technique. And we use the golden ratio, which really is in art considered the most beautiful for the face. And the golden ratio is used not just in brow mapping, it's used in art, Michelangelo's art, and just, anything like that. In nature, you see a lot of the golden ratio. So Kay is going to cover that with you and how to really design that perfectly proportioned eyebrow. But within that, then, we take face shape into consideration, because our goal, of course, is to not just make a beautiful brow, but to make a beautiful brow that looks great on that person, that fits that person. So really to balance the features out. And so we'll cover that this morning. And then this afternoon, we'll go over your homework. We're going to do some face mapping on paper. And then as time allows, we'll hopefully get to face map on each other. And that may sound like a lot of time for face mapping, but we can tell you that's half the battle. If you can design that brow and get it marked on the person and do it in a relatively good amount of time, that makes a huge difference for you. Now, in the beginning, it can take you honestly an hour, 2 hours to do that. Don't beat yourself up about that. It will eventually go a little bit quicker, but you don't want to rush that. That is your roadmap to what you're actually going to do on the skin. Okay, sound good? So any questions on that? No? All right. Well, then let's jump into our manuals here. And on section 1, and you're all in section 1, yep, I can see you're already in there, we're going to look at just a little bit of the history of permanent makeup, because of course, to us, we're kind of looking at this as something sort of new and exciting and trending. And some of us who are a little bit older, we might remember in the past when permanent makeup was kind of a buzz. Unfortunately, it was a lot of those magic marker eyebrows and things like that, which we don't do anymore. Techniques are so much better. But really, permanent makeup goes back to like 3300 BC. When you look at archaeology, you will see that the Egyptians, the Greeks, the Nubians, the Chinese, pretty much every ancient culture has had some form of permanent makeup or tattooing. As it technically is called. And you would see it on humans as well as on animals. On animals, of course, it's called branding, but literally that is a way of marking the skin. So when we hear the word tattoo, literally what that means is implanting pigment into the skin in some way, shape, or form, and in some design or symbol or whatever it is that you've opted to implant, with the idea being that it is going to be permanent. Now, one thing I do want to point out is that when we talk about permanent makeup, it doesn't mean that there isn't some upkeep. Okay, and I think, are you all kind of aware of that definitely there is some upkeep to it, but once you implant pigment, that skin is never going to be the same, whether you've done microblading or actually worked with your machines. So that's why we do use that terminology. So when you see semi-permanent, just know that that doesn't mean it's going to fade away completely. The skin's still going to, be different, but it just means that they might need to touch up a little bit sooner. So sometimes microblading is called semi-permanent. But for our purposes, it all falls under PMU, which is permanent makeup or cosmetic tattooing. Now, Kelly, you mentioned the paramedical. And so the term paramedical, that is still tattooing and permanent makeup falls in that category. But here we're looking at doing areolas and nipples for breast reconstruction. We are working on vitiligo. Sometimes it is for scar camouflage. And often you'll even see some artists working on breaking up scar tissue with a needling procedure and then going in and camouflaging. So there's a lot of different paramedical applications as well. Kay mentioned scalp. And that really kind of covers both sides of it, because it is obviously for looks, but on the other hand, it also is paramedical, because if you have someone who's had injuries on the head, scars, things like that, the hair no longer grows. Those who have alopecia and things like that, it really can be, a paramedical type of procedure as well. So it's really very exciting, and on your own time you'll be able to read a little bit more into that history. But what do you think are some of the benefits of permanent makeup? I'll just put this up on our whiteboard here. So what would be?
Save time.
Yes, time. Time saver. And even those of us, I'm going to point out, I have my eyebrows done. I still like putting makeup on them, but it doesn't take me 2 hours trying to get them to balance. You have a base there. And if I don't feel like putting it on, I don't have to, So they're, definitely huge time saver.
Less chemicals, which could be used for people who are more of organic base free or have skin sensitivities.
That one right there, yep. So I would say definitely with having to put less on for those who are sensitive. Now, that can also be a little bit of an issue when we go into the cons. We have to look at the fact that there is always the possibility of allergy to the pigments. However, we do patch tests, and it's not a common allergy, particularly in PMU. We are working with pigments versus some of the tattoo inks that are used. They're both wonderful to work with, but we can always check, and if they're not sensitive, then absolutely not having to continually put stuff on. The friction and things can be a big advantage. What about those whose eyesight is going south? Like my mom, for example, and me. So
it's hard
for those who had the eyesight,
it's hard to put your makeup on with cheaters. You can't really get your eyeliner.
No, you're kind of going like this, and the eyesight, and also shakiness.
Oh, sure.
Because a lot of people, as they get older, there's nothing wrong with them. They're just getting older, and shakiness. So they don't have to.
How about like with wrinkles and stuff too? Because I feel like I put that on some people and they have just so many right here. It's hard to get a straighter line.
Yeah, so aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah.
Beautifying.
Yeah. That's hard.
You will be so surprised how you can beautify and youthify a person. Especially, it really depending where you work, but in my clientele, I worked a lot with like 70 and 80 years old people, which is their skins are very hard to work with, but the finished products are just amazing.
Usefulness then, because basically it is. I mean, even with lash extensions, if you put them on someone just to open up their eyes, it makes them look like 10 years younger sometimes, just because of they don't look sunken in.
Put eyebrows on somebody,
exactly.
And it's just, I was shocked the first morning I woke up with eyebrows on. I mean, really, for somebody who's pale and old, it was amazing. It is. It's very, very exciting. And money saving. Think about all the money we spend on cosmetics, especially those of us who are really loving all the new product, and it's exciting. And again, it doesn't mean you're never going to put a cosmetic on again, but it literally can be money saving. And for those who don't wear a lot of makeup but want to have a little color on them in particular, so I always say that it saves money. Okay, so those are all wonderful benefits, and this is true for both men and women. Keep that in mind. I have microbladed many gentlemen And it makes such a difference, especially when they are maturing, losing the ends, losing the fronts. Think of your paler, your redheads and things who don't have a lot of color. Men are just as susceptible to alopecia and cancer treatment, hair loss, and all of that sort of thing. So this is across the board. Any gender, any age, any race for that matter can benefit. But there are some cons. So what do you think some of the cons might be for permanent makeup? We've got all of these wonderful, wonderful things, but what could be some not so good things?
Allergies?
Yes, allergies. An allergy could be to, not just to the pigment too, but to a product that you're using before or after. So that's why you really do have to work with good product, make sure that you are using items that are designed for permanent makeup, and also that we're following bloodborne pathogen protocols, that we really are being sanitary and being careful with all of that. Absolutely. What else do you think might be a con? And some of these might not come to you yet because you haven't worked with it, but those of us who have know that there's certain things that can go south.
I would say if if the client didn't like it, because it's going to take some time to wear off.
Mhm.
So knowing how to fix things, but
Yeah, I would say con could,
permanent.
con could be the fact that it is permanent.
Some tattoo back in the day last the whole life.
Yeah, I mean those magic marker ones that we talked about. Now, that's great if you love the shape and the color stays true, but if you don't, then that's not so good. So poorly designed, if you're looking at the fact it's permanent, and then what about a poor?
Well, and trends change. The shape
Yes.
changes.
Fashion change. Trend change.
So those trends, absolutely, and that's why we do work with the golden ratio. Obviously, we want to satisfy our client. We want them to be happy. But if they're coming in wanting some really quite dramatic trend, we might need to have a discussion with them, because it's going to look good at first, but as the eye droops and things change, that might not be exactly what they want to be wearing. So
What about, I guess this would fall under permanent, but say a woman eventually wants to have a facelift. Is that going to change where her eyebrows end up? I don't know.
well,
does.
it does. Yeah,
It does.
Especially if they have the forehead done. If they're just doing like mid-face, midsection, lower, it's not going to have as much of an impact, although it will impact this. If they do the front, the forehead, that is going to impact, absolutely. And so that's one of the benefits of having it done, so that you do get some gradual fade out, but also knowing how to remove and being able to do some fading procedures, how to camouflage. Those are all things you'll ultimately want to learn, because there will be those situations where they've either had a poor design, or like you said, with a facelift, and all different things can go on where they might want to have part of that changed. Of course, there's laser, but laser on the face isn't generally done as much as on the body. So we have different methods. Kate teaches actually a removal using a solution that can really work quite well, and then neutralizing, so camouflaging. And so we don't just camouflage things that they need camouflaged, we can camouflage poorly done or just permanent makeup that needs to be changed. Absolutely. I'm going to put one down here because you might not think of this, but it's called migration.
Pigment has feet. Certain pigment size and principle of the pigment has feet. They can draw up the bloodstream and migrate around the area, especially carbon black around the eyes area when you do eyeliners. So that's why she put down migration.
Yep. So how I would describe this would be, let's just say this is the eyeliner. Okay. You've got that nice eyeliner. But that technician went too deep with it. And now all of a sudden that eyeliner is moving down here. Or like on a lower liner. All of a sudden you're starting to get, and we'll see some pictures later on in the class, where all of a sudden it's
all over the lid.
it's all over
All
the place.
over. Gosh.
Yeah.
I have seen a lot. I have seen a lot of them like that. So which is removal is a pretty good method in order to get it, because the some laser company do removal around the eyes, but most of them don't.
Yeah, most of
So-
them don't.
Dangerous.
And a lot of the laser as well, they don't want to work with permanent makeup pigments because of the titanium that's in them. It can kind of turn whitish with the laser. So the type of removal that Kay teaches is actually going to be a better option. And this isn't to make you terrified of doing eyeliner or anything like that, because if you're doing it properly, you don't have to worry. But it also makes you remember you do have to keep your mind on what you're doing and where you're working, because that's the last thing that we want to have happen.
Is that only because of the depth, or is there a certain type of ink as well?
Certain type of ink.
Yeah.
Okay.
Carbon-based, definitely more likely to do that, but anything you implant too deep or get in a blood vessel, if you get into the tear duct or a blood vessel, then it will, kind of have a little blowout there.
Okay.
And so that can be a problem. And then the one other thing that kind of goes along with this is color change over time. And you've probably, if you've been online and been looking at all the forums and things, you've seen the pink eyebrows, the blue eyebrows, the kind of gray eyebrows, and every variation in between, where the pigment just isn't that stable and the color changes. And that's where camouflage comes in, where we can go in and actually camouflage that for the person. Sometimes removal is necessary, but oftentimes we can just go in with a gray vanish. We're going to discuss the color wheel and color theory, and of course then going in, so for example, if they're bluish, what do you think we would probably cover with?
Orange.
Orange, exactly. Oops. Did it come back up? Hang on, I think it has a little thing here I have to hit quit. There we go. No?
Just keep talking.
Okay, I'll just keep talking. You can bring it up. Yeah.
With the inks, I've known when I've called around and stuff like that there's different types of inks that you can purchase and buy.
Yes.
Is that with the fading, like some people fade into purples and stuff like that, is that along with the ink but also with the skin in the person?
Yes, and so that's
Okay.
another, you do want to, you definitely, we're going to talk about Fitzpatrick's skin type and undertones, because definitely the skin color and the skin undertone is going to have an effect on how that pigment not only looks initially, but then how it wears. And absolutely, you want to be sure some pigments need more modifiers. They need, you're going to add a modifier to them so they don't change. But even in the best scenario, you can potentially get a little bit of that going on, and that's why, you're going to let them know they're probably going to want to come in for, a touch-up and things like that. But we want to have that happen the least amount, the least amount possible. And we'll discuss